Hey there, listeners. Welcome to HealthTech 0.1, where we have conversation with investors, entrepreneurs, and experts to get their insights on building health tech and med tech companies in developing countries. My name is Billet, your host. I'm excited to have Dr. Joseph Mocanu here today. We got introduced by one of his portfolio company. He has a very interesting background. He was born in Eastern Europe, went to school in Canada, worked in China, and now lives in Singapore. Has been in consulting where he found his passion for investing. He's not only a global citizen, but also investing in global health tech. One of the interesting things I found about the VC that you run is you talk a lot about the impact that your companies have on lives, right? And that's not something that VCs talk a lot about. So super excited to have a conversation with you, not just because of your amazing journey as a VC, but it's also my first podcast and you are my first guest, right? And we have talked about it and we are both podcast junkie. So why don't we start by having you introduce yourself, your journey, and how you found Verge Capital.
Well, thanks a lot, Billet, for the opportunity, and I'm honored to be your very first guest. Hopefully not your last. Hopefully many more to come.
Yep.
So really briefly, I was, to your point, born in Romania. I grew up in Canada, and I thought I was going to be a video game programmer. I loved video games. I loved computers. My parents got me my first computer when I was 6 years old, and they said, if you want to play video games, you have to go make them yourself. So I went off to the library, copied the programs in BASIC, changed them around, see how they worked. Yeah, I know. BASIC was
the language back then.
Long time ago. And then one day I kind of woke up and realized that video games are not going to really add too much to the fact that we get sick, we get old. That's not quite fair. And so I thought I'd be a scientist instead. So I did my undergrad in molecular genetics in the University of Toronto, did my a doctorate also at the University of Toronto in medical biophysics. So I was engineering viruses that would replicate in cancer and give off light while doing so. And that was a pretty interesting experience. At the same time, I had discovered entrepreneurship because I had met a medical doctor who was interested in the brain and the signals that the brain produces, and thought it'd be interesting to help him out, make some extra money, and then realized that you can take some of the research that he was looking at and actually make it real time and actually make it into a real-time brain imaging system using EEGs. And that ended up being something you could make a company around. Now, unfortunately, we were quite inexperienced at this medical device business, and there was a lot of things to learn. And one day I realized it'd be probably a bit more effective if I went into the business side of things and maybe on the investment side. Now, unfortunately, when I did my MBA, I graduated at the peak of the great financial crisis, which took my aspirations from I'd like a job in investing to I'd like a job, right? And luckily, one of the places that still was relatively less affected by the GFC was China. And I had the great opportunity to move over there and work with one of my mentors who had founded his own investment management firm. But he was doing investments in publicly listed Chinese companies, but they're on foreign exchanges. So that was an interesting opportunity. That was around 2009, 2010. And from that experience, I also realized the importance of management consulting and structured thinking. He was an ex-McKinsey guy himself.
Yep.
And thought, okay, why don't I try to do this management consulting thing first, because maybe that'll make me a better investor later on. So I moved back to Canada, joined the first firm that said yes and let me do nothing but life sciences, and that was Oliver Wyman. I thought I would do it for 1 or 2 years, learn how to think in bullet points. I ended up spending 7.5 years there. Part of it was really quite interesting work. I got to work with all the top pharmaceutical and biotech companies. And then halfway through, I was asked to move to Singapore to help start life sciences and digital health over there, where I eventually led that part of the practice. And during the course of that, coming to Singapore, it was absolutely beautiful, clean, efficient, safe. But when I went to the countries around Singapore to look at what their health systems are like, look at their problems, help our clients out, the health systems are not very good, unfortunately. And people were basically dying of the same things they were dying of 100 years ago, in addition to all these modern diseases, or rather modern consequences of our lifestyles, like hypertension, heart disease, increased cancers, dementias, which are all non-communicable. And now, across the world, is actually the majority of the disease burden as opposed to infectious diseases, accidents, and trauma like it used to be. And the problem is, and we can probably get to this later, is that our health systems are designed for the latter. They're designed for accidents, trauma, and infectious diseases, not these chronic diseases.
And that was the time you started investing in companies.
Exactly.
So how, like during that period when you're doing consulting, how do you come across DUs? How do you evaluate the DUs? And how do you think about it during that time?
Well, part of it is kind of our job at the start. So our pharma clients and some of our insurance clients really wanted to have partnerships with innovative technologies or innovative startups in order to future-proof and extend and enhance their businesses. So that's kind of how it all started out. We also had private equity and VC clients who wanted us to help develop their strategy or do commercial and technical due diligence on some of the targets they were looking at. So that's kind of how I started getting a bit more involved in the startup community. Started mentoring some startups and also had the opportunity to invest in them personally because they were looking for money. I thought they were doing really interesting work using technology to solve some of these big problems, but they really struggled to raise money. But the investors tend to be a little bit more conservative, or they tend to be a little bit more on the gambling side. And unfortunately, health tech is neither. It's risky, it's technical, it's slow, it's unproven, but you also don't get that insane rush like you do with, say, e-commerce, the e-commerce buzz that was happening 10 years ago, or the rise of cryptographic currencies.
It doesn't grow that fast, right? Like health tech companies takes time to grow and it's a really long time. So how was your, if may I ask,
Sure.
How was your personal investing during that period and what have you learned from it?
Well, I guess the motivation of the personal investment at the start was never really to kind of get rich or make money off of it. I mean, it was always kind of, it'd be nice if it did, but I just really liked the founders and I wanted to support what they were doing. And I kind of assumed that if they were going to do a really good job, it would pay off in the end. I think the first lesson I learned was valuation discipline.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you are managing your own assets and you're not really trying to maximize the financial return on it, you're a little bit loose on the valuation. You're like, okay, whatever, I'll just give the founder kind of what they want. When you're doing it for others or the objective is to make as much money as you can, you do have to be really strict on that because there are two consequences with that. One is if you misprice it at the start, sure, you will curtail how much you'll be able to make in the future. I mean, the difference between a 5 million and a 15 million starting valuation when you're exiting, let's say at 50 million is huge. Yep. One's a 10x versus a 3x, 3.3x. So that's one of them. The other one is it kind of ruins the next stage of financing because if the founder's expectations are here, but the company's fair value is here, they may struggle raising that next round of financing.
But that actually, as a founder myself, right?
Yeah.
This is a very difficult question on what's a fair valuation, right? And it's always a function of market, right? Which market you're in. When I was raising, we were in Thailand, which valuation was extremely low compared to Indonesia, which may not be fair, right? How do you think about it? Do you use price equity ratio, price sales ratio, or at C stage is just a function of demand and supply? How many investors are looking after you and going after you, and how much do you need to raise for money?
Yeah. Honestly, I think it's all of the above. And it's definitely more of an art than a science. And probably the right number is the number that both you and the investor don't like.
Yep.
If one of you likes the number a lot, then it's probably the wrong price. Right?
Right.
Yeah. And, later on, basically, I think the way we look at it is what do we think this will be bought for? Or what do we think we will sell our shares at in 10 years' time?
So are you a fan of venture capital method?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay. So
it's like working backwards.
Yep.
But the thing is, there are still, regardless of whether you're coming in from a bottoms up
Yep.
or a working backwards approach, you still have to have all these different assumptions which are debatable.
Yep.
And I think the nice conversation to have, and I know we're kind of going on a sidetrack here,
Yep.
is really being very transparent about the assumptions that go into your assessment and have a discussion with the other party on these different variables to see if you agree or disagree. Because sometimes a founder doesn't even know how VC math works.
Yep.
They think 12% annual increase in value is acceptable.
Yep.
No, it
Yep.
unfortunately isn't. VC's looking for between 35 to 50% IRR
Yep.
on their investment, which is a lot more aggressive than they may realize, which is why venture capital isn't necessarily the best kind of funding to get as an entrepreneur. Sometimes you want to get a different kind of funding. But, I discovered all these great entrepreneurs through the client work, and actually the very first investment where I was the first investor actually came directly from a client, and this was a multilateral development organization.
Mm-hmm.
And our job was to help them come up with a private sector investment strategy for healthcare. And they said, hey, can you check out this company? I can probably name it, LifeTrack. And went there, thought, wow, checked all the boxes. This is great. This is a perfect fit for this multilateral financier. And they said no. I was very surprised.
What was the reason they said no?
Too small, too early. So then I thought, well, isn't that kind of your job? Because when the company is not too small and too early, it's probably a good business and private investors should have no problem investing in it. So I kind of asked the founder, it's like, hey, I know these guys aren't looking at you, but can maybe we invest? And then that was the first one. I put together a round of, it was $250,000 first capital into the company, and kind of worked.
Okay.
And then,
how did it go?
well, they're still around. I think they're doing...
That's the first thing, nice things to hear.
Yeah, they're still around. I think they're profitable. They've probably done about over 6 million cases in teleradiology. They're in multiple countries, multiple continents. So we'll see how they go. I think it is a very interesting time for that sector of the business. And then did it again.
Mm-hmm.
This time with a company in South Africa where, one of the problems with working the consulting hours, 80 to 100-hour weeks, is that you don't really have time to really go look for startups unless they kind of fall to you. So then my wife, who's also an ex-entrepreneur, I thought it'd be interesting if I just send her around the world to look at startups that could be interesting to invest in. And she found one in Helsinki, but it's actually from South Africa. I was there for the Slush conference, the Global Investor Alliance. They had won a place in that, so they got a trip to Helsinki. And then we thought, this is a really interesting technology and a really interesting concept. So my wife kind of did the personal due diligence, make sure the founders are okay. I did the tech due diligence. And again, we put the round together, and that one has had a much better outcome.
Yeah.
And that company was HereX. And just, I think earlier this year, they were merged with Eargo through Patient Square Capital in the US in a transaction whose value is confidential, but certainly it is in the mid 9-figure range.
Okay, so during your consulting times, how many did you do?
During my consulting times, I did 13.
13?
Nine
did
of
it all
which,
go well?
No, absolutely not. 9 were in health tech,
Okay.
4 were in other sectors.
Right.
Generally speaking, the ones that were not in health tech did worse.
Okay.
I think one lesson there is invest in what you understand, unless you view it as tuition.
Right. And what's the, we oftentimes say we learn more from our failure, right? So what were the commonalities between those that didn't go well?
I wouldn't say that there are commonalities.
Okay. There are multiple factors.
Multiple factors. If there is one commonality within all of them, it's an incomplete team.
Okay. Incomplete means the founders are not, they don't have the multidisciplinary,
There's usually something missing, and something that was missing and not identified soon enough.
I see.
Right? Some could be missing technical acumen that perhaps we thought was a bit more commoditized than it really was. Because I think there's an abundance of tech talent, but maybe some things... There's a difference between the availability of tech talent and choosing which tech talent is appropriate for the company.
Right.
Another one is just general financial discipline.
Yep.
There's a lot of great engineers that make lousy financial controllers.
Yep.
And there's others where maybe they're just not aggressive enough in pursuing business, where they think, if I just build a great product, people will come to me.
Right. And how, it's interesting you haven't mentioned doctors or medical professionals. How important are they as a founder at health tech startup?
I have to watch my words here slightly. I think generally doctors and professors do not make good entrepreneurs, but there are always exceptions, and sometimes the exceptions are really strong exceptions.
Right.
I think that to develop a compelling solution, especially if one that's going to be used by clinicians, especially in more complicated settings, you do need to have that clinical expertise closer to the core, but not always.
As a founder.
Yeah, as a founder and the founding team. Sometimes it's just good enough to have them as early customers that provide feedback or on your advisory board, or if your family members are doctors, that's also helpful. And that is a common theme that I've seen. And in fact, my co-founder in Verge, Ed Dung, is an investment banker, but his family is all doctors. And he started the most successful remote disease management platform in East Asia outside of China. Started this 12 years ago, so it does take a long time. And he should be IPOing in a couple of weeks on the Taiwan Stock Exchange. Yeah. So it's really cool. So he's my co-founder, but he's very part-time as a co-founder because he's been extremely busy growing this to over 1.5 million patients.
Wow. And because some of our listeners would be medical professionals, right? What are some of your, I guess, advice to give to them if they want to really want to be an entrepreneur? Like, what do they have to give up? What do they have to think about?
Yeah, well, most medical professionals already know how to work really hard. That's, I think, really important. You need to have that horsepower and that endurance to do a startup from scratch. This is not easy. Most medical professionals have had to study for a very long time. Guess what? It takes that long to also to do a successful health tech startup. So I think some of the fundamentals are definitely there. I think the challenge is I find with certain high achievers, just because you're good at one thing doesn't mean you're good at everything. And I find that there is this bias to think that, I can do neurosurgery, so I should be able to run a business and sell no problem. Completely different skill set. There's a lot of EQ that comes in business versus a lot of raw horsepower IQ that comes in some of the medical practices. So that's probably one of it. Teamwork is really, really important. I think in a lot of curricula, teamwork is not emphasized in medicine. Yes, team-based case management is something that is emerging more and more. But from my understanding, and maybe things have changed because it's been some time since I've been in school, maybe there has been a little bit more emphasis on this. But back when my day, there really wasn't.
So a little bit ability to accept failure, realizing that not everything can be learned through books and a bit more practical, and say, hey, business is a different skill. Building software or building solutions is also a different skill than maybe neurosurgery and obviously neurosurgery is extremely hard, and we will never be able to learn it to do it, right? But I think that's if they have the brain power to do that, to learn neurosurgery, business is not that hard. Just need to be a little bit open mind to learn those. Okay. That's an interesting observation, right? And we have delved a little bit into those. Could you explain or just share your personal story on the transition from consulting out? And that's a big jump, right? Yourself, you've been in consulting for 7 years. By that time, you probably earned a ton of money. And what made you say, hey, this is the time to jump and start a new VC fund? And people think VC is extremely sexy. What they don't realize about VC is actually starting another startup, right? It's at least going to be 10 to 12 years before you are comfortable with the management fee, with the carry of fund 1, fund 2, fund 3. I imagine that must be a scary time to just leave consulting and do this.
I like to joke that McKinsey got me into consulting and McKinsey got me out of consulting. So I had just beaten McKinsey on a big project at a pharma client, and I thought, wow, That's amazing. Because our firm, at the time, we're the fourth largest management consultancy after BCG, McKinsey, and Bain, out of kind of what's called the premium class of management consulting services. And I thought, well, for us to beat McKinsey, that's a very temporary victory. How do I make this sustainable? So I wanted to get some professional coaching. I thought, well, how do I talk to senior executives better? How do I better shake their hands and, do all this client relationship stuff? So I went to our Southeast Asia head to ask for a bit of training budget on this. And he's like, oh, personal coaching's too expensive. Why don't you find a course?
Okay.
Or find a program. So I thought, okay, I had met this course called Linhart, or this program called Linhart Life 2. I thought this might be interesting. Maybe it's when the budget, and the wife of the SEA head actually works for that company, so he's probably not going to say no or anything bad about it. So I go to it, and as part of seeing whether I have a fit to this program, I had an interview that ended up going about 2 hours with the founder, whose name is Sunyan. And Sunyan was one of the top rainmakers at McKinsey. He was the personal mentor to Dominic Barton, who used to be the ex-MD of McKinsey globally. So I had a conversation with him, and I thought it was going to be okay about all this selling and influence and all that sort of stuff. And actually it's more about purpose, driving towards like, what actually do you want to do with yourself? What actually drives you? And so I started talking about the investing part of it. And as I was talking about the investing part, the stuff that I really like to engage with startups, kind of realized, actually, that's what I really, really want to do. And then kind of he made the observation that I was burning the candle at both ends. So I was spending a lot of my time on the angel investments, but also a lot of time in the client work. And the only reason I was going to work every day was to make money to feed my hobby.
Yep.
Right? So that was very inefficient. So why don't I just work on this directly? And then I realized, oh my God, I need to start a fund. That's the only way to do it, because no one else was investing globally in health tech startups relevant to emerging Asia. And that was really the focus at that time. Now it's relevant to everyone. But back then it was like relevant to emerging Asia, because that's what I knew.
So that was the thesis, emerging Asia.
Yeah. Global tech relevant to emerging Asia.
I see.
Yeah.
And you are now in Fund 3 of...
Well, we're closed our Fund 2.
Okay.
I haven't really announced that publicly yet, but it is closed, which is really nice. Probably going to do something again.
Yep.
I think it seems to be working.
Yep.
We are hitting what we want to hit. But to go back to your question on what was that moment, because it is actually scary. And so I think it was a bit of naivete, right? I think two things. One is the moment you know what you want to do, you have to do it, because very few of us are ever blessed enough to actually have clarity on a direction or purpose.
And courage.
Yeah, well, I think the courage comes out of that.
A little bit later.
Well, even Jensen said he would never start NVIDIA again if he knew what he had to go through.
That's right.
Right. He's really a very interesting character. May I wish you great suffering.
Yes.
From one of his, I think it was a Stanford commencement speech. So in any case, I didn't know what I was doing. I really didn't. I thought, okay, I'll go start a VC fund because it seems like it's the natural thing to do. I asked my friends if it's a good idea or not, and them being my friends and having never started a fund, they said, yeah, you should totally go for it. You should be able to raise the fund in no time. So another piece of advice is always consider the experience and motivations of the advice you get.
Right. Yes.
So,
and that is actually extremely, not just VC founders, right, but like startup founders. I've seen a lot of founders just listen to people who just never experience anything and just give advice and don't consider the background. Be critical of the advice that you get, right? But has the thesis changed from Fund 1 to Fund 2? And one snippet about when we were having conversation in Singapore is that you guys actually liquidate one of the portfolio company before. I'm not sure whether that's a public news that you can share, but before you close the fund. It's extremely rare and very good news that to hear.
Yeah, so the thesis between Fund 1 and Fund 2 changed slightly.
Okay.
Because when starting Fund 1, I had been familiar with the emerging markets around Singapore, so a little bit of South Asia. So I thought, okay, let's look for things that are relevant to these markets. And the thing that we learned during COVID is that markets rhyme.
Yep.
There may be more similarities between, say, like Indonesia and Kenya than there are between Indonesia and Thailand, even though they're much closer to each other. And also, during COVID, we realized that regional isn't necessarily regional if everyone's closed down. So some of our companies, it made more sense for them to go to Africa than it did to go to their neighbors because it was all locked down. It was the same distance, essentially. It was Zoom call. So we started looking at more global emerging markets. We had made kind of an accidental investment in Colombia. And this was because we were looking for distribution partners in LATAM. And this founder was just so great and the price was decent that we thought, oh, we should just make an investment. And we did have this 10% special projects bucket, which we used for that. So now it's really investing in technologies that are relevant for everyone. Rich or poor, all countries, low complexity, low infrastructure requirements, low cost. So that's the kind of thesis. And I think that's going to really be the thesis going forward as well.
And I think it's not a lot of fund that does that. A lot of funds, especially in the US, try to push the forefront of sciences, right? Like which is great. But at the same time is what a lot of founders don't realize in developing countries is there are infrastructure issues that needs to be dealt with. For example, getting a $200 phone to be able to use a EHR program in a nursing home, which one of my portfolio company built, right? But then those are and the engineering is different. And I've met people who say, hey, why don't you just give iPad to everyone? I was like,
do you know how much they cost?
Do you realize how much do they charge and how much bottom line they get? Are they ever gonna buy your iPad? So I think some of this constraint can become a feature. And have you seen that developing countries health tech startup are a little bit different than developed countries? And what are your current portfolio split between developed countries and developing countries?
So to kind of address the first question, a sub-bullet of that is there is the possibility of cutting edge technology that is still affordable. So I think in the vast spectrum of high tech and sensors and methodologies and algorithms, there's a subsector that can be immediately applied for low cost, low complexity situations. And we do look for those. And a lot of our investments in the developed markets are in companies like that. I think that the key difference between a lot of tech that comes out of developed and emerging markets is really the origin. Do they come out of universities or do they come out of the basements of whoever is developing it because of sheer necessity? And there are some markets where it's kind of peculiar, like South Africa, where you have really good science and you have really scrappy entrepreneurs that really want to build very practical solutions. And the marriage of the two is really interesting. I think India is another place where you'll have a lot of deep tech that comes out of just engineers tinkering around, but also you've got really good academic institutions that spin out tech as well. And that's a really interesting place because immediately, like, the problem's just in your face. So a lot of the deep tech that comes out of India is actually immediately relevant.
And population size as well, right?
Yeah. So what you make up for low patient numbers in the US and high economics, you make up for in sheer volume in places like India and China. So yeah, and in terms of our own portfolio split, we have 36 portfolio companies right now. Probably a third is headquartered predominantly active in emerging markets. It used to be a bit more. And this is also a function of market dynamics in that in 2023 and 2024, US and Europe were cheap. Venture was dead in these markets, and you could get really great deals on portfolio companies, and you can pick out of those ones that are relevant and have the willingness to go into emerging markets. You've probably seen our pill robot, the Endiatics company. They did their first major clinical trial in India, which is great. And they already have partners there. And the tech is already quite applicable and amenable to LMICs or low to middle income countries. So we're quite excited about that. Another portfolio company of ours out of Danish Technical University made their first money in Kenya. Wow. Doing EEG, like low cost EEGs, the amplifier is the size of a cell phone. Cap is really easy to apply for the electrodes, and it works with African hair, which previously you'd have to kind of shave or cut the hair, but this works quite nicely in that you can pull the hair through the mesh of the cap. And their next major market was Indonesia, and they just got approval for India, and they just got a pre-order there as well, which is quite cool. So there are companies that you can start in developed markets, but you can actually make reasonable, good revenue in emerging markets as long as you're solving a really important problem.
Right. And I think that, do you see startup and developed markets go after their own market first and before they come out, and or some of them actually think global developing market from day one?
Yeah, I think it depends on where they're born. Generally speaking, we'd like to see them go after their own market, and generally speaking, they do. In this particular example with brain capture, it was a bit baffling why they didn't go after Denmark first.
Yeah.
They got their CE mark, but they went straight away to emerging markets. And I think part of that was due to the mission of the founders. And only after they started getting good results in Kenya and other places, they realized, hold on a second. This actually works in Denmark too. There are like remote communities in Denmark, nursing homes and all that would really benefit from this tech. Why don't we actually do it there? So they've started pilots in Denmark and Hungary and Romania and other places. So it's kind of weird that it's going to emerging markets first, then their home markets second. But generally speaking, it's the other way around.
Yep. And you talk about the term called fourth market.
The fourth world.
The fourth world on the other podcast I listen to. So that's is interesting. And we assume that the US are all the same, China is all the same, but it's not, right? So I think that's something that to think about as well. Just a practical side on the emerging Asia check size, excluding India and China, right? Like they're very different, right? What's a typical seed stage check size and traction valuation that you're looking at? Our listener can have a benchmark of where they need to get to.
Yeah, so we kind of, at the seed stage, we kind of benchmark globally.
Okay.
So we want all of our companies to be able to have at least a 10 to 20x increase in value between when we come in and when we exit.
Okay.
Our check size minimum is 500,000.
Okay.
And typically that's probably the right size for a seed stage investment in this part of the world. Maybe a little less, maybe a little more, depending on what the founder's trying to do. But I wouldn't really chalk it up to the market. It's really about what the founder's actually trying to do and what they're going after. I think the valuation expectation should also kind of be similar across the markets with some nuances around sovereign risk.
Yep.
So if you are in a riskier country, we'd want to adjust that a little bit down. Similarly, if the purchasing power of that country and you're going after that country first is going to be a lot lower, especially in what you're going after, then it would also be adjusted down. Similarly with how much you need to pay your employees.
Right. But that will reflect in the projection anyway.
Yeah. But generally speaking, I think 3 to 7 million at seed stage in this part of the world is all right.
Right.
I would really struggle to justify anything above 7.
Yep.
Considering that in the US, our seed valuations, at least where we come in, maybe you call it pre-seed, is like 6 to 12, depending on the quality of the team, what they're tackling and what they achieve to do. And in no version of the universe should the US be cheaper than an emerging market.
Right. With that kind of check size valuation, what traction would you be looking at? Do you want to see pilots or do you want to actually actual ARR, actual revenue coming in?
I think it depends on whether it's a deep tech or a platform type of company. I think in deep tech, revenue is certainly not going to be there.
Yep.
I'd be very surprised if there's revenue. It might be research contract revenue.
Yep.
We would expect to have scientific risk mitigated. We would expect to have some sort of prototype and then a path to mass production, regulatory approval, that sort of stuff. If it is a platform, we'd want to see some sort of revenue or willingness to pay from someone and some sort of indication that you've got product market fit. Because it is extremely cheap to start a company these days.
Yep. But there's no, like Fox platform company, do you have a specific ARR number? No. Okay.
I think it's really more about a binary case of evidence, not evidence, right? And some sort of growth curve. But it's going to be different. Like we've invested anywhere from claims processing to just most recently neurodivergence, community management, to the, how shall I say, the unsexy glue that should bind different pieces of a health system. Right.
That's in a way it's interesting because it's unlike other VCs, right? The founders probably go to and say, hey, seed stage, I'm looking at 1.2 million ARR. But don't come to me yet. But I think as a health tech focus VCs, it's interesting that you don't actually look at that too much, but more of just being first principle thinking of, does this make sense? Is there product market fit for that particular platform, right?
Yeah. Also, another consideration is, given we have 36 companies, where are the synergies? Are we stronger together than in isolation?
I see. So basically, you look at evidence that the product is solving real problems in the market, right? For founders to get that first pilot, get that first revenue or first ROI clinical partners is actually quite challenging.
Yeah.
Right. And how do you see successful founders gain that trust very quickly? Do they need to do certain specific thing, or is it their sales skills, or their product is really just neat?
I think there are multiple paths.
Yep.
I think sometimes if you have a strong relationship, you got a bit of a pass. Sometimes if you have overwhelming evidence or very persuasive or have compelling clinical publication, that can kind of get your foot in the door. But I've seen multiple combinations of trying to get to that, but we do need to see that. I mean, we need to see that you can hustle, that you can actually get buy-in from some of your key stakeholders.
Is ROI enough, or usually you want to actually see actual user using the platform and not just paper-based?
No, we want to see actual data.
Right.
Yeah, I think if you're coming to a VC of our stage, you do need to have something. I mean, if you don't have anything, you just have an idea and a doctor saying, yeah, I'd use something like this if it existed.
Yeah.
Right? That's friends and family money.
Right. And I think in this part of the world...
Or bootstrapping, even better.
I feel like that is actually underrated, right? And government grants, I'm talking about Thailand specifically, there's a lot of grants out there.
That's excellent.
That you can get there, no equity dilution, just get that first traction in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think engineers anywhere in the world cost pretty much similar. Good software engineers is expensive, right? So I think that grant and bootstrapping is extremely important. And also, do you see a lot of companies trying to go after the market that is an immediate revenue, so they can gain a bit of traction, hire a bit of people, get some excitement before they go to the aspirational market?
It's interesting because I've seen both. I've seen kind of these pragmatic founders who are just, they're like, I don't want to rely on investors, so I'm just going to try to make money by any means possible to make sure that we're in a position of strength. But what that does is it sometimes delays them to get after what they really want to do. And then on the other side, I've seen absolute purists, which will ignore revenue, who are saying, I'm going to get this clinical or health economic evidence, and I'm going to put all my effort into that, and I don't care. We'll find the investors, and we'll get there. And I think in this environment, the first path is probably more prudent.
Right.
Unless you can get a ton of non-dilutive financing that allows you to be a purist, it's a hard place, and you don't ever want to rely on others for your existence.
Right. And this, you're talking specifically about the global investing environment right now, because of the high interest rate and things like that.
High interest rate in general, malaise around the venture asset class. I'd say there are some places that are just very good at grant financing. I mean, Europe is full of grants.
Yep.
I'm less familiar with what's going on in Thailand, although I do know there is one biotech company in Thailand that's gotten a lot of grants.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there are 2 or 3. We're actually having them on a panel in a couple of days in the CIRAD MIT conference.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. So I think utilizing those grants is extremely important, but it's a mix of both, right? There are times that founders like myself and my co-founders was discussing whether we should take like contracting projects to get revenue, and I think there's no right or wrong, but it can be a distraction. Yeah, and it's really because contracting project is not easy to execute as well as you are consultant yourself, right? But I think that it's situational, and that sometimes really, if you really want to do the company, that's the decision you have to make.
Yeah, I guess the question is, can you negotiate or choose your contracts to be at least somewhat aligned with your developmental roadmap?
Right.
So at least part of your R&D is subsidized by that. And it's not like you're going sideways, but you're just kind of going diagonally.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about developing and developed market a little bit, right? One of the observation I have is that developing market, because the ability to pay is low, the revenue that you're going to get from the tech spend will not be enough to cover the software engineers or engineering costs. How true is that, and what can they do to mitigate it?
Yeah, so I'm not sure I agree with that.
Okay.
Because generally speaking, if the unit economics are low, so are the wages. So I find that unless you're hiring engineers in expensive markets, there still may be a way around this. I mean, historically in the companies we've invested in, they've been able to utilize engineering talent in Vietnam or India or Bangladesh or South Africa, or Eastern Europe, where it's relatively cheaper.
Right.
I do know that there is a bit of pressure given remote work and the normalization of wages globally, but it's still a clear difference in our experience. I think the other thing that is probably everyone talks about is the rise of agentic coding. And as a personal practitioner of that, it has been an incredible force multiplier.
Yep.
I think there are things where it is extremely useful where a junior developer may not necessarily be needed, and that would
significantly bring down the cost.
Yeah. I think regulatory costs, those don't scale with economies. I mean, regulatory is always expensive because generally you're going to go for FDA or CE.
Yep. But in actually some of the interesting thing, regulatory costs actually beg to differ in some of the
Oh, very good.
Yeah, because in developing markets, the regulations are a little bit light. For example, especially in tech, right? Like digital health. In the US, you need SOC 2, you need HIPAA compliance. In Thailand, no one cares. Like they don't actually check, right? And customer, they'll ask about it. If you know the concept, how to talk about it, they're fine. But the regulations are still behind. And that makes, and if you know HIPAA costs, that's 100K lower in terms of cost of compliance in developing markets. So it's one of the cases that can start here and be transported overseas. Yeah,
that's fair.
Yeah. In that sense, do you think can a company be VC fundable in a developing market that is not big like India or China? Can a company be a unicorn without going to those markets or developed markets?
I'm not sure if unicorn, but certainly it can be VC fundable.
Okay.
Because again,
not all VC wants startup to be unicorn. No need. There's no need to.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like I just read an article yesterday that now the model case for VC in Southeast Asia is a 50 million exit. Yeah, that's the real aspiration for today. But honestly, if you can get a good entry price, that's one thing. The other thing is this what you're working on? Is it a winner take all sort of solution? If it's a platform, so if you're number one in a country like Thailand, that's still like 65 million people, right?
Yep.
So if you can convince everyone in the country or a good proportion of the country to spend $10 to $100 a year on whatever you're doing, that can still be pretty lucrative.
Yeah.
Right. And then the other thing is what you're doing relevant to other markets, because regional expansion or multi-geography expansion is certainly something that can increase the value of your company. And if you start from a strong market where you can really battle test, then that's fine.
Yeah, in my view, there are two ways to multiply that, right? One is go mass, and with having the low revenue per ticket. And by going that route, you have to go through National Health Social Office, NHSO, or things like that. So that's one path. The other path is to actually go service enable and tech, right? Like is there a path that you see more success, or just general and it depend on the founder what their preference are?
I think we're starting to see more movement towards tech-enabled services. Pure digital plays in emerging markets have just not yielded the outcomes we're hoping for.
Yeah, and it's just economics, right? Tech revenue is 1% to 3% of the whatever industry revenue it is, and the tech enable is just a full stack, so it just depends, and you're just more efficient than others.
Well, part of it is you don't even have the infra yet to support a tech-only play. I mean, in order to have a tech-only play, you need to have kind of a mature infrastructure.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the plan. It will be one of the first ones to be reimbursed, and that's why they're IPOing, because it's a great story. It's like, finally, we've got a digital health solution that is publicly reimbursed, that is making good revenue, that is making good health economic sense, and it's listed. So it's showing the region that this is possible. So I'm giving Ed probably a little bit disproportionate pressure to be that trailblazer and to really show that this is a sustainable model that can be replicated across the region.
And we definitely hope as a founder and investor the government can buy some things that really move the needle for the public health, right? Just some of our listeners are still at idea stage, right? Just want to have a little bit of conversation. And in health tech, you can have idea from both sides, from your personal experience, right? Or talking to healthcare professionals, and also from the other side and say, hey, I've seen this in the US, seen this in the European, let's make it apply and make it available in our market.
Mm-hmm.
What is there a right or wrong? What are the nuances? And have you seen what are the winning strategy around that?
I think that's a great question. I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong. I think you just kind of have to do your homework. Every health system is pathway dependent the way it is because of the history and decisions that went along the way and the cultural, environmental, and economic circumstances around each. There are health systems that rhyme. Again, as I mentioned earlier, there are some that look similar, and that may be enough, but there may be some fundamental design differences under the hood that would be an insurmountable barrier if you try to take one solution from market A to market B, even though they look similar. I struggle to think of examples right now where that is the case.
Right.
If I had a little more time, I could probably think of one.
Okay.
The US is a very perverse market. It's extremely distorted. There's a lot of middlemen and intermediaries that I'd say capture a lot of the value that probably contribute to a lot of the inefficiencies you see. I mean, 18% of GDP on healthcare with poorer health outcomes than many other countries is not really a model to emulate.
Yep.
In the US, what's an interesting behavior is that consumers are willing to pay for health. In Europe, they are not, because the government gives everything for free, so why should they pay for anything out of pocket? Asia's a bit of a mix, because in Thailand actually has a quite good public health system. There are countries where they do not, despite universal healthcare objectives and goals. So I think it really depends on the nature of the healthcare consumer and the nature of how healthcare is financed in that country and who is allowed to deliver what.
Right.
And it does take a bit of on-the-ground research to see whether it works or not before jumping headfirst. Also, whether something is gate-kept by an HCP or not. Because if you can do something non-regulated over-the-counter, okay, that's more like a consumer health type of play versus a serious medical application. So things like women's and men's health.
Yep.
Hims and hers in the US, that's fantastic. And that seems to be scaling nicely in Singapore and Malaysia in particular. Yep. Like I have a friend who started a particular men's health clinic.
Okay.
And he did it as kind of a side project off of his health tech startup.
Mm-hmm.
That little men's clinic, and the thing's designed like a speakeasy. It looks kind of like more like a bar than a clinic. Kicking butt.
Wow.
Absolutely kicking butt. Doing better than his startup.
Wow.
In less time.
Wow.
Right? And then he started in Malaysia, and now he's expanding it to Singapore.
Wow. So there's no right or wrong in a sense.
It's just fit.
Yep.
But don't assume that something just because it works in one place will work in another place.
Have to do a bit of thinking and don't just say, hey, let's just dive in, see what it takes, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think there's a impetus to act and have a conversation, right? Go along the way, collect information, and then you decide again.
Yeah.
We are in 2025, so we cannot talk about health tech without AI. What's your thought process around AI, and specifically generative AI, right? Like, because it's not a deterministic system. In a sense, it's very sensitive, especially when it comes to healthcare. How much do you look at the sensitivity, specificity, drift checks, and error rates and things like that when you come to evaluate a technology?
Yeah, so we haven't done too many generative AI startups. We just approved actually a really exciting one.
Yep.
At one of the East Coast universities in the US.
Oh.
I think for us, it's really about the stakes, the risks involved. And I think right now we're more comfortable with some of the more administrative simplification of processes where there is a higher tolerance for error than something clinical. And if it is clinical, then it needs to kind of be explainable. So at least the doctor on the receiving end of it can follow the logic and agree or disagree with it. So one of the investments that we did do, and the one that was actually acquired, was a clinical decision support tool called Pathway, and it was acquired by Doximity just recently. Kind of bittersweet because it was only hold for 2 years.
Okay.
It would have been nice if we could see this go kind of all the way.
You can hold Doximity stock still.
Well, cash transaction. We got cash, which is actually not bad.
Too bad. Yep.
Not too bad in this day and age.
Yep.
It's like DPI is so rare that it's nice to actually be able to
Get some cash,
Yeah. So with that one, it was basically just, first it was curating about 500 million pieces of medical literature or medical information, and it was traceable. Like there was references to each single thing that was recommended out. It's basically perplexity for medicine. So that's nice. So that allows you to kind of trace where it goes. I think there is like one instance of hallucination that I had experienced during my testing of multiple queries. But the nice thing is you can figure out when it's hallucinating or not because it's all referenced.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's extremely...
But in terms of drift, we don't check drift too much. I think it's...
Do you think it's important for them to start, for the Gen AI community to start publishing drifts, error rates, tolerance, and things like that, and make sure, and moving more towards like physical engineering scheme, right? Which you actually publish those.
Yeah. I think it would be great to see it. Of course, as...
We haven't seen too much of it though.
Yeah. I mean, of course, as an investor, more is better.
Yeah.
Would you like A, B, or C? Yes.
That's true.
But I think the field is a little bit young where you haven't even had time to observe drift.
Yeah.
Because everything's just so early. But you start talking about drift when you're talking about more mature large language models, like you're looking at ChatGPT 3 to 4 to 4.5 to 4.0 or whatever the numbers are now 5.
Yep. Right. Maybe I have one practical questions, and I just want to hear from you who have talked to a lot of founders, right? As a founder, sometimes you don't like to talk to competitors. Personally, I'm an advocate of talking to competitors and people in the industry, right?
Yeah.
It's so interesting. Personal experience is that they're actually nicer than you think they are. And they just share because they think that wants to move the industry forward, we would just share and just, let's do this together.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
Yes.
Working.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think when you're early in the industry, everyone's kind of frenemies, right? It's like we're all
and
trying
they're nice to you.
Yeah, we're all trying to build this together. It's like no one's really definitively winning or not. Sometimes you may be competitors today, but you may go in a different direction tomorrow. Sometimes when you're not competing, you might be competitors the next day. So no one really knows. It's still fluid. So generally, I'm an advocate of a more open dialogue, an open community. Of course, you don't want to be spilling your trade secrets, but certainly I think our field can benefit from more cooperation than competitive tendencies at this point.
And I think founders should spend more time in the industry and less in VC conference and health and startup conference, especially in health tech, in my view. Learn a lot more from traditional guys doing this for 50 years, 30 years. What are their experiences?
Oh, absolutely.
And people on the ground, and they may not know systematic thinking, but it doesn't really matter because they have ton of experience.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. If you read the book Super Founders by Ali Tamaseb, the only place where, healthcare, I just gave it away. The only place where unicorns show a disproportionate success rate from industry insiders is healthcare. That is the only industry.
Wow.
Only industry.
Not even insurance or
banking. No.
Oh, interesting.
I think there was one industry where being an industry insider actually hurt your chances of becoming a unicorn. I struggle to remember which one that is. It might be telco. Don't quote me on it. But.
Right. Okay, let's just go to opportunities in emerging Asia. Where do you see the non-obvious health tech opportunity in emerging Asia right now?
Ooh, non-obvious opportunities in
emerging.
Obvious. No, non-obvious. Non-obvious is more fun. I think interoperability and standards.
Okay.
Being the glue. I think that's non-obvious. Everyone focuses on the exciting stuff like marketplaces and disease management and stuff. Right. But I think there's something to be done in the infra. in the underlying.
I agree. But at the same time, it's extremely political, very hard to crack. And it will take time, right? But probably small pilots start and carve out certain part of the market.
I think it might, maybe there's an opportunity in ancillary services in the interface between provider and insurer, private sector.
And that could work with TPA, third-party administrator for those not in the industry, right? Okay, so for founders to get a meeting with you, what are the metrics and what's the first line of email that will caught your attention?
So generally, I mean, it takes a lot to get my attention via email because 99% of them I just route to our website so our team can look at it. We get a lot of applications from all around the world. So generally, it's nice to have a structured process so that our entire team can kind of go through it and assess, is this something that we want to discuss in our pipeline meetings, which are weekly?
Yep.
For me to kind of, and I'll be quite honest, to get my attention, I need a strong recommendation from someone I trust. That's probably the best way to do it. There are once in a blue moon, maybe 1 in 1,000 emails where it's just written so nicely, so cleanly, the information is interesting enough, and I'm caught in a good mood.
Mm-hmm.
That's also important because sometimes if you're really busy and you're just stressed out, even if it's a great email, it's going to just, it's going to be missed.
Right.
So there's a lot of factors that need to come when you're contacting one of the founders of a firm, because most entrepreneurs think that all a partner does is kind of just like look at deals and make deals. But unfortunately, there's a whole bunch of other activities that a partner does in a firm.
They're like CEO, right? So fundraising,
administration,
accounting,
so much administration. Sometimes coming onto a podcast, going to conferences, living on planes, partnership conversations with pharma insurers and other things, people management.
Yep.
So there's a lot of things. I'd say that actual investing is only a small percentage.
And what goes into the pipeline conversation? Like which kind of company will pass your team?
So generally we have a pretty crisp idea of what we're looking for in terms of thesis. So it generally has to pass that. And it also has to pass that kind of, is this impactful filter? Can this look like it can make a 10x? And if it looks like that, or we need more information, but it's still interesting enough, okay, maybe we'll discuss it. Sometimes we'll just ask for more clarifying information before we bring it up to a pipeline meeting. But basically the way it works is our system is we get a bunch of startups every week that come in through our website or sometimes directly referred. And then the partners will review the applications, quick summary that's prepared by our team. If we vote yes, we want to talk about it. If there's 2 yeses, then we talk about it out of the 5 partners, right? If that's kind of like the threshold, if we're getting a bunch of startups that we have no context on, if they're all like cold applications or weak introductions, if it's a strong introduction, we'll just force it through. It's okay. We're talking about this on Monday.
Right. That's very good. So referrals is extremely important, and the usual metrics, right?
Yeah.
I think those are...
Yeah, because one of the things that probably not appreciated is that when you're investing early, product and service kind of doesn't matter nearly as much as the team does. But how do you express a team in a deck? It's okay, you can say I went to this school, but you could have been like the worst student at that school. Or you could have been the best student at a school no one's heard of, right? Or you say you did this, but did you really do this? Or is it just like you had a small contributory role in that?
And it's not the best students will win in startup, right? Like it's great, it's your ego, it's non-ego and everything that goes along with it. Yep. So we are almost up, the time is up. Let's go with lightning round.
Sure.
Overhype and underhype in health tech right now.
Overhype's AI, but underhype is AI.
Okay, can you explain a little bit?
Yeah, so overhype is the AI and pattern recognition and all the exciting generative stuff, but the underhype in AI is actually time saving.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Maybe ideas for founders. Yeah,
I'd say overhyped specialists, underhyped nurses.
That's definitely agree in that. One diligence questions you wish founders ask you.
How do you they never ask us for portfolio references.
And can they?
Yeah.
Is it inappropriate?
No.
It's not?
No,
Okay.
no. Investments last more than marriages. Typically, your average investment duration is like 12 years.
Right.
Your average marriage is 9. So don't you want to, like, I don't know, date a little bit?
That's fair. That's fair. And last is for our listeners who feel ready but unsure to be and want to be an entrepreneur. What one small step they should do this week or next week?
One small step they should do this week or next week. Oh, that's not lightning round. That's hard.
Hard question, right?
That's a very hard question. Don't spend money for a week.
Don't spend money for a week.
Yeah.
And try be an actual entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true because the entrepreneurs do not have salary for multiple years before they.
Yeah. Or
and even they get funded.
yeah. Or like cut your expenses by 90% for a week and see what happens. Because you can't like not spend money, you'll die.
Yep.
Right. But just like instead of Grab, take public transit. Instead of eating out, cook something. Or see if you can live frugally for a bit.
That's extremely good advice. Thank you. It's been fun. Thank you for the hour. And this is HealthTech 0.1. Thank you, Dr. Joseph Mocanu, for your time. I know founders are finding it hard to get your time, but I feel extremely privileged to get an hour of your time. Thank you very much.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. And hopefully this is one of many episodes to come.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being the first guest on the show.